It has recently been revealed that the President of the United States has formed a secret study committee and has poured significant government resources into it to discover where to move the Jews. I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, and this episode of Right Angles brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. This is all true, every word of it. The project is called M Project, and it was highly top secret. In fact, the president has suggested in a letter to a colleague that if anybody leaks this in the media, that they should be guillotined. Have their head chopped off in the old French terminology. The president, of course, the most hated man in America, I would guess, is Franklin Delano Roosevelt. That's who you were thinking, right? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this recently released documentation has shown that President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, had a secret project called M Project for Migrant Project to decide what to do with the flood of refugees during and after World War II. His particular concern, as he tried to figure out where to move people, whether to Africa or South America or where to resettle people, was that we not allow the Jews to congregate in large populations. And in fact, he thought it would be better to get people of German or Northern Italian stock in a particular area, like in the United States, for example. This is a long-held view of Roosevelt. So it wasn't something that's suddenly cropped up during World War II. Gentlemen, he actually said, he wrote some columns in the 1930s where he said, a little new European blood of the right sort does a lot of good in every community. A little new European blood of the right sort does a lot of good. Wow. And he frankly wanted to spread the Jews out around the globe so that they couldn't gather together. Now, Bill Whittle, I'm sure that you, more than anybody perhaps, are absolutely shocked that Franklin Delano Roosevelt had any, even a drop of anti-Semitic blood in him. Are you not?
Well, first of all, I knew it wasn't Donald Trump when he said he should be guillotined.
I knew that was a tell.
It was a giveaway. He does have a concentration camp kind of mentality, didn't he?
He has an unconcentration camp. He's
the guy who basically quarantined the Jews. Yes, a dispersal thing. He's the one who put Japanese Americans into concentration camps during World War II, over serious opposition, I might add, and. Here's the thing about FDR. I think I can say this with a fair amount of confidence. I suspect that FDR was the most fascistically inclined president that we've had in the history of the United States. Some of this I am willing to concede to the fact that there was something about the 1920s, the interwar period, really, the end of World War I to the beginning of World War II. There was something about that with all of the economic disruption and the loss of faith in everything following the Great War and all the rest of it, that seemed to around the world give people the idea that the solution was this all-powerful state. And I think it reflects well on America and to some degree also on FDR, to say that if that's as fascistic as America got, we got out of this one pretty lightly. But there is in Roosevelt and in everything that Roosevelt did a very, very strong element of concentration of power, and personal aggrandizement. I mean, the two-term rule was never constitutional. It was simply just honored, by every president that it was just inappropriate to be president longer than George Washington. And Roosevelt decided he wanted to double that. He was elected 4 times. So I think with regard to the Jews, Henry Ford was a well-known anti-Semite. I think Lindbergh also. And it's, to me, 2 things. It's another indication that the hero of the left has feet of clay and really earns those feet. But it's also, to me, an indication of how far this country has come and how deep we didn't go.
Well, yeah, and the article points out, Stephen, that this article in Tablet Mag, that this study that was going on behind the scenes to the tune of $10,000 a month never resulted in any firm policy. But as I believe we did a previous episode on perhaps a couple of years ago, the United States turned away Jews who were trying to flee here under Franklin Delano Roosevelt's administration. FDR had a luncheon in the White House with Winston Churchill, then Prime Minister of England, in May of 1943. FDR's Vice President Henry Wallace, taking notes, said FDR described M Project, this project I mentioned before, as a study about, quote, the problem of working out the best way to settle the Jewish question, really? End quote. Stephen Green, doesn't it seem that at least the Democratic Party has an obligation to stand up and disavow their legacy of racism and anti-Semitism?
Yeah,
wow. Yeah. If only we had a mainstream media that was mainstream instead of just being one arm of the Democrat media complex. Wouldn't that be something? Let me tell you a story. My grandfather was always my go-to guy for talking to about history. Number one, because he was old and had seen a lot of it, but mostly because he was just the smartest man I knew, and he was extremely candid. He would always tell you exactly what his conclusions were. And when I started really getting into World War II history, I guess in my early 20s, I stumbled across the Morgenthau Plan. I don't know if you remember who Morgenthau was. I can't even remember his first name off the top of my head.
Henry, I believe.
Henry Morgenthau, thank you.
That's right.
Yeah, one of FDR's men had a plan for post-war Germany that was going to de-industrialize the entire country. Just rip up their factories, their boatyards, everything, and
shepherds,
move them
that's
out.
What farmers and shepherds.
Yep, and the consequence of that, he was even going to take away their mechanized farm equipment. The consequence of this, of course, would have been mass starvation and a German population of maybe 25, possibly as high as 50%. But you were talking about the on-purpose starvation of anywhere from 20 to 30 million Germans. So this sort of grand solution mindset was not unique to FDR's view of the Jews or the Japanese or anybody else. As Bill was saying, it was very much part of the theme of fascism and communism in the 1920s and the 1930s. And I asked my grandfather about this, and he said, no, that's too cruel. What he would have done was exactly what FDR was talking about doing to the Jews. He said, I just, and keep in mind, this is my Jewish grandfather, and the Holocaust was fresh news in his mind when he came up with his plan, which was to just evenly distribute the Germans around the world so that in one generation there wouldn't be anybody speaking German again. And I said, well, what do you do with the country where Germany used to be? And he said, you split it up between France and Poland. I think they've earned it after 2 wars. I'm like, wow. This guy is kind of a hard ass. But the thing is, this was an old guy spouting off about kind of a wild thought he'd had as a young guy. What FDR was doing was actually setting some possible policy proposals from a position of very great power. You know, we're supposed to get more serious when we take that oath of office. The weight of the responsibility is supposed to sit heavily on our shoulders, and I would like to think that the crazy scheme my grandfather came up with in his 30s and told me again in his 80s or 70s would just not be anything he would consider in the White House. But something we need to consider is the huge powers that we have trusted the executive branch with, and what kind of men occasionally get elected to that office, or in the case of the bullet we dodged 2 Novembers ago, what kind of woman.
Well, in defense of Steve's grandfather, at the very least, the man was not sucking up federal treasury dollars in order to conduct this experiment in his mind.
Nope.
You know, this was a government-funded project. And I guess what I'd like to say, ladies and gentlemen, is every time you hear somebody today referring to, a politician from the Republican Party, for example, as some sort of racist or fascist or, whatever, disparaging them based on some sort of terrible views that they have. You got to remember that these people we didn't wake up yesterday. This kind of history has a long account, a chronicle of it, and specifically in the Democratic Party. And Bill is absolutely right. It's this streak of fascism that I think came from this idea, this progressive idea that, wow, now that we're so smart and we can reach around the world with almost, at that point, it seemed like instantaneous communication with telegraph and things like that, what problems will we not be able to solve? There was great admiration for the Soviet Union in its bloom as it was starting out. And for Mussolini and for Hitler's regime. There was a great deal of admiration. Look how they can make the trains run on time, so to speak. And we want to be more like them. It's like the admiration you heard from President Obama occasionally about the Chinese. Wouldn't it be great if we could be like the Chinese state? That's the danger, as Steve pointed out, is people getting into positions of power who have these abhorrent views. It's not that we're ever going to be able to control people having horrible views like this. It's that we should never put so much power into their hands that they could literally, with a wave of a pen, say, I think we're going to spend significant amounts of money every month to figure out a way to disperse the Jews around the world, for example. Or to decide what to do with people of mixed race. I encourage you to read this article in Tablet Mag to learn more about this. You're not going to hear a lot about it in the mainstream media because it is the hero of the Democratic Party who is doing this. And in fairness to the Democratic Party, that M project was canceled by Harry Truman, who was FDR's successor in office, who didn't think that the government should be doing so much kind of sneaky skullduggery behind the scenes, and who didn't like the waste of money, the businessman that he was. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.